hey, are you dealing with the EUDR? In this podcast episode, I'm going to talk to Ramya, who is working at the Plutus Coffee Group, and they are working really closely together with the producers, and they have a really interesting view from the producer side on the EUDR. So if this interests you, definitely check out this episode. Hey, Ramya. And first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. For
Thank you.
those of the listeners who don't know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the job that you're doing right now?
I'm currently working as the project manager at Plutus Coffee Group. My name is Ramya Nsherura. So basically, I'm at the forefront of our mission in Uganda to ensure our coffee supply chains are sustainable and compliant with the European Union Deforestation Regulation, the EUDR. So what I've come to learn in my experience is that it isn't just about ticking boxes for regulations. It's about making sure the coffee we all enjoy is sourced responsibly, protecting both our environment and the communities that depend on it. My path to this role began with an interest in how global markets operate, particularly in the coffee trade. It has always fascinated me due to its rich history, fantastic taste, and cultural significance. And personally, coming from a family of farmers, I've seen firsthand how unfair the prices can be, especially for smallholder farmers in Uganda. And what's surprising is that most of these farmers don't even think that don't even drink the coffee that they grow as a cash crop, yet they see the least financial benefit from it. And at Pluto's Coffee Group, we're working to change that by helping farmers and SMEs, exporters, negotiate better premiums and promoting inclusion, especially for women, refugees, and youth who are often overlooked in the industry. And what's surprising is you don't know how much work it takes to get your latte or espresso. There's so many steps along the value chain from farm to exports where injustices can occur. So at Plutus, we're also helping the SME exporters become EUDR compliant and remain competitive in order to access the EU markets. This is through the Plutus Coffee Consortium, which we created with over 17 coffee exporters and farmer cooperatives. And they collectively export about 1.3 million bags annually. And being particularly passionate about entrepreneurship, I can relate to these challenges in my own endeavors. So I'm driven to be part of the solution, bridging the gap between sustainability and ethical business practices. So my work at Plutus allows me to channel my passion and into ensuring that our efforts not only help our businesses thrive, but also contribute to a more just and inclusive future for everyone involved. I hope that answers.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely answers the question. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation because for me, I mainly get a very EU-focused opinion on all of the topics. So I'm very interested to see how you have an opinion on this and what your view is on this. But before we dive deeper into the topic, maybe to get everybody on the same page, can you quickly explain to those that don't know yet what the EUDR is and what this whole topic is about?
Okay, the EUDR in full is the European Union Deforestation Free Regulation. It's a critical piece of legislation aimed at ensuring that products placed on the EU market, including coffee, cocoa, timber, palm oil, are not linked to deforestation or forest degradation anywhere in the world. So this regulation requires companies to conduct strict due diligence, tracing their supply chains to verify that the commodities they source, produce, or sell are not contributing to deforestation or any human rights violations. And the EUDR is actually a part of the EU's broader effort to combat climate change and biodiversity loss by promoting ethical, sustainable, and transparent supply chains, which will hold businesses accountable for their environmental and social impact. Yes.
And about the implementation of the EUDR into the different markets, what is your opinion about this? Like, how is the implementation progressing currently?
Uh, in the case of Uganda, the EUDR is actually causing a wave of anxiety among the the government, the Ugandan coffee farmers, and exporters. So they're worried that failing to
Mm-hmm.
comply would mean heavy fines or having their consignments destroyed, which could jeopardize their access to EU market, a market that takes in about 60 to 70% of Uganda's coffee. And the challenge
Mm-hmm.
lies in meeting the requirements, which I would say are a bit stringent in that we've had a very limited time frame to adjust, especially Uganda being a third world country. So it has been quite challenging to prove our supply chains to be transparent, ethical, and deforestation free, in addition to being fully traceable. I would say these are the three key considerations of the EUDR. So, for many small and medium sized enterprises, as well as smallholder farmers in Uganda, this is really an uphill battle. For one, um, the lack of infrastructure needed to track every step of their production process. Setting up the systems is
Mm-hmm.
only expensive, but also time consuming. And it's already leading to trade disruptions and bottlenecks. Meanwhile, the multinational companies here in Uganda are playing it safe by stockpiling coffee that already meets the EUDR standards. So, of course, you can see that there's a drastic difference in financial resources available to multinational companies and to the smallholder farmers and the small and medium-sized enterprises. So that's one of the biggest challenges we're facing. And this has intensified the pressure on the Ugandan market, which is still trying to catch up. So, if you actually analyze the previous exports of Uganda to the EU, there's been a recent spike, and it isn't due to a surge in demand, but it's actually due to the multinationals stockpiling. So, this situation, I would say, from an analyst point of view, undermines Uganda's competitive edge in the global market, seeing as EU is one of our major destinations and we cannot afford to lose this. And Uganda is especially prized for its Robusto coffee, renowned for its unique taste, aroma, and flavor among EU roasters. And
Mm-hmm.
as the market shifts, prioritizing fully compliant suppliers, smaller producers might find themselves squeezed out. And in Uganda, we actually comprise of 1.8 million smallholder farmers. Because as I mentioned prior, these are actually grown as cash crops on a small plot of land just to sell. So not really it's not really consumed domestically, though there are efforts to increase local consumption. So in essence,
Okay.
could lead to less diversity in the market and have a significant impact on the local economies.
Okay. So I see that this is a particular difficult situation for Uganda.
Yes,
In some of your LinkedIn posts, I saw that you also reference the US or China. So is the situation in particular difficult for Uganda, or how is the global comparison among some countries for this topic?
I think it has been quite a global phenomenon. So it's not only affecting just Uganda or Africans as well, but it's really affecting EU as well. So it's not just the producer countries. It's also the importers. So I'd say the global reaction to the EUDR has been anything but unanimous. We've seen major economies pushing back, with Brazil and Australia leading the charge. They argue that the EU is basing its decision on flawed deforestation data, which they fear could create unfair trade barriers, especially for vital exports like coffee and palm oil. In the case of China and the US, mm, they have also been very vocal of their objections, citing concerns over data security and the potential economic fallout of their supply chains. In response, most EU importers, as I say, they're scrambling to stockpile compliant products. But this rush to comply is leaving smaller producers, especially in the coffee and cocoa sectors, at risk of being shut out of the market. And this global tension, it kind of highlights the balance between pursuing both environmental and social goals, but also maintaining fair trade practices. But despite all the pushback, it has been confirmed that the EU is holding its ground, moving forward with the regulation without any delays. Yes.
Yeah. Please.
Also, may I ask a question, actually?
Yes, of course.
Seeing as I'm based here in Uganda and I'm more on the producer side of things, I would like to actually have your perspective being on ground in the European Union.
Yeah. So I think it's quite an interesting topic, and I really enjoyed listening to your perspective because, to be totally honest, I haven't thought about the drastic effect this has on the producers in Uganda, especially on the smaller companies. So for me, based in the EU and like talking to a lot of EU companies that are also affected with the EUDR, I see that a lot of companies are overwhelmed with the legislation. Like it came very fast. It still was kind of moving. It's not entirely clear, all the things. So there's a lot of confusion. And now companies are kind of trying to get ready for it, but are doing this because they're also larger corporates. They are kind of slow in their approach. So yeah, in the EU, there's definitely a lot of confusion around this. I think that in general, the idea of the EUDR is a good one to like do things against deforestation, but the way that is implemented right now definitely causes a lot of confusion and a lot of stress on companies. So also why I'm doing this podcast right now is to try to like see what are different solutions, how are companies adapting to this, and what are different ideas in the market.
All right. And actually, it's not even just the EUDR that's out. There's also the CS3D, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is another wave of concern. So everybody needs to ensure that all of their practices are compliant with the CS3D.
Yeah, definitely.
There's
I,
also rumors that other global markets, such as the USA, are coming up with their own sustainability regulations. So I think this is a good way to prepare us and a good way to actually combat climate change. And one thing I know is that sometimes you really have to push people to get the ball rolling.
yeah, definitely. Regarding the CSDDD, I see that there's a lot of overlap between the EUDR and the CSDDD. So I think there will be definitely some things that companies need to start to trace is included in both things. And yeah, I'm also quite sure that other markets like the US will come up with their own supply chain traceability legislations. May it be like the EUDR or the CSDDD. So I definitely think that this topic will continue to like stress companies in the future as well. I just hope that it's like in a way that companies have the chance to adapt, then become more sustainable, and that we can all move towards a more sustainable future, which is what we definitely all are looking for. But this actually brings me also to the next question that I had for you, because so far we looked at it on a quite international level and how are countries affected by it, how are countries reacting to it. I would really be interested in your opinion about how individual companies are affected by this. So first being who's affected by this, and then how can companies actually adapt to this? What do you see in your day-to-day work?
So, well, the EUDR's impact is actually far reaching. First up, exporters are under the microscope. the need to ensure every single shipment meets these new deforestation-free standards. And in Uganda, this is not something that they were anticipating on this financial year, I would say. So it has been a significant investment. But considering how important EU is of a destination for our coffee exports, missing the mark isn't an option. So fines and rejected goods are on the line, which could seriously hurt their businesses. And importers in the EU aren't off the hook either. They're also racing against the clock to adapt their operations. The deadline for the EUDR is December 31st, 2024. So they've got to dig deep into their supply chains and produce detailed reports proving their products are compliant. It's a demanding task that's shaking up their usual processes and it's adding layers of complexity. But the ripple effect really doesn't stop there. There's the farmers and the producers, especially in places like Uganda, Vietnam, Ethiopia, and Brazil, that are among some of the biggest global producers of coffee. They're feeling the heat too. So these new traceability requirements have been tough to meet for sure, especially because we're lacking in the robust infrastructure. The EU, though, has dedicated some funds to Uganda to combat climate change, deforestation, and to ensure the registration and creation of a national database. But again, these are businesses and they must keep afloat. So it's really a race of time. And this new regulation is really creating a domino effect from the fields to the stores. I'd say it encompasses every aspect of the value chain. I don't think there's anybody that has been missed out, from the growers, exporters, even the retailers, to even the cafes in Europe. So everybody's really caught up in this whirlwind, and navigating these changes could be a complex challenge, but I think it's a positive step in reshaping how businesses operate on a global scale. And
Yeah. And from your personal experience in this field, sorry to interrupt you, what would be your tips and recommendations for companies to adapt to those challenges and maybe even overcome it?
uh, first, I would like to talk about, I think, what is the major disconnect that the importing countries or continents such as Europe and USA have compared to the producer regions such as Uganda. For example, in Uganda, the challenge of social injustices like child labor and forced labor are compounded by the complexity of the supply chain. So, the coffee industry, for instance, is a tangled web involving numerous undocumented middlemen and traders who operate in the shadows. These intermediaries often play a crucial role in the supply chain, but their lack of regulation and oversight makes it difficult to track and enforce any sort of ethical practices. Add to this the risk of deforestation driven by shifting cultivation practices. So, in Uganda, as farmers move to new plots of land in search of fertile soil, they often clear forests without considering the long term environmental impact. So, this cycle of clearing and shifting not only threatens the local ecosystems, but it also complicates the efforts to monitor and manage deforestation. And I would say that this situation
Mhm.
is further exacerbated by the state of poverty that these most smallholder farmers are in, because they would not be driven to such constraints if they were getting a fair price compared to the exporters or the multinationals. Because when you actually look at the price of a cup of coffee compared to what the farmer who grew the bean gets, there's really a huge discrepancy. And so while the fight against human social injustices is critical, it's quite intertwined with the broader issues of supply chain transparency and environmental sustainability. And the complexities in undocumented middlemen and environmental consequences of shifting cultivation are all part of the problem Uganda faces. So this is something I think would be great if the people in Europe would actually consider the ripple effect that it's having on the smallholder farmers. So I would say
Yeah.
that the way to address this would be collaboration on a local scale and a local and a global scale as well to make a meaningful difference. And
Yeah.
to go on to your next question about the tips and recommendations for companies. Uh,
Hmm.
so in my experience working in Plutus Coffee Group, where we actually handle all stages of the value chain, we work with the farmers, we work with the factories, the harling stations, the grading factories as well. All steps, the multinationals, the government, CSOs, NGOs. I would say first, transparency is your best friend. If your supply chain isn't crystal clear, it's time to change that. You need to know where your products come from and how they're made. And this helps you build trust with customers and keeps you compliant. So we've actually been seeing uh, a decrease in not really a decrease, but kind of a skepticism about the need for specialty coffees and the certified coffees and who is really bearing the brunt of that cost. So that's where this actually really comes to light. Next, I would say collaboration is key. You need to sync up with your suppliers and partners on ethical practices. The more aligned you are, I'd say the smoother things will run. And I think one of the most important things I would emphasize is education and awareness of our partners. So many people, um, surprisingly, are unaware of the EUDR and the CS3D. So, working in regions with less awareness of social issues, especially third world countries like Uganda, it's really imperative to invest in training. So when your suppliers understand the why, they'll be more committed to the how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the things you just mentioned, they make a lot of sense. And I really see that there's a lot of value in there. Also looking at the time, I have one more question that I want to ask you,
Yes.
um, within the time of the podcast, because I often get asked from companies about free materials and about resources to educate themselves. What would you recommend to a company that comes to you and asks you like, hey, they want to learn more about this topic. They want to like get a little bit more of an insight. What would be your best recommendation?
Absolutely. For the latest and most crucial updates on the coffee sector, I would say tune into our coffee trail newsletter on LinkedIn. Um,
Mhm.
It's basically your go-to source for insider insights on EUDR, CS3D, any imminent sustainability trends, as well as industry standards. So, and if you're looking for where to start on getting about your sustainability and streamlining your supply chain to comply with EUDR or CS3D, I would say look no further than Plutus Coffee. We offer tools and services to help you source ethically and stay compliant.
Perfect. Yeah. Could you definitely send me the link from your LinkedIn newsletter so that I can put it into the show notes so people can just like easily find it and click on that?
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for taking your time. I really enjoyed talking to you. It's super interesting for me to get a different view on this because I'm very much into the EU market and I'm talking to companies that are complaining about like, oh, there's so much bureaucracy and so much stuff that they have to do. But yeah, it really puts it into perspective to talk to someone that knows the producer side a little bit more. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope that we can talk very soon.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Hey, if you come this far, thank you very much for listening to the AtlasZero podcast. If you are interested in this topic, we just launched the AtlasZero Navigator, which is basically a product compiled of all the interviews we ever done, all the materials we either created or collected, comprised into one product. It basically helps you to understand all the sustainability reporting requirements of the EU. And we really think it's super helpful. So if you're interested, definitely check out the link below and check out our product. And also, and I have to ask this, please like and subscribe to our channel. Like, it helps us a ton to reach more people. And at the end, our goal is to help as many companies as possible. So you can help us a little bit in achieving that. Thank you very much. And I hope I see you very soon.